Good morning. We're a smaller group for today since we have a number of folks who are traveling or are feeling sick. So thank you for making it. I'll try to keep this meeting on the shorter end and just go through a few things that you need to know to wrap up this week and to prepare for the final week of the term. So we took some time in the last class to talk about family communication and some of the elements related to the final exam that can help you to prepare for that assignment. Today we're going to be doing a practice question for the final exam and dedicating about 20 minutes for you to work on that. And then we'll be talking about some of the remaining ideas for family relationships, including some of the challenges with family relationship structure and organization. So again, the final exam, December 12th to 14th, taken on Canvas rather than taken face-to-face, just like the midterm exam. I did want to share an update for you as you're working through the practice questions. So the final exam practice questions that are listed on Canvas, again, are the 5 multiple choice and 2 short essay. The short essay questions are fixed and now have questions that are updated and the types of questions you should expect to see on the final, right? So one of the short essay questions about negative patterns and interpersonal communication, we'll be talking about next week. One of them that's talking about relationships and relational communication. So again, you're welcome to, if you'd like, work through a practice short essay question and request feedback from me, or just use that to help as you're preparing for that. We'll also be doing some midterm review or some final exam review next Friday. So we also have Canvas probes due on Sunday. So number 7, if you still need to turn in some Canvas probes, you'll have the opportunity to do that. We'll be talking about workplace communication, there's patterns that are personal communication, that final wrap up class meeting. Similarly for the midterms, as I know a lot of people are traveling or have other commitments and things going on, I'm going to make December 9th, that Friday's class attendance optional. So it'll be a review day for the final exam if you would like to attend. If not, you're welcome to take that time on your own. And then again, remember that the extra credit is coming up and we have that ORA visit next week. So this is a 3-part question. Again, this is a single question that is divided into 3 different components that I'd like you to take some time to work on writing or typing. So this is a question related to friendship and family communication, which has been our topic for this week. So part 1, according to reading in class discussion, in what ways are friendship and family communication similar and different? Asking you to give an example there. Take one's concept in family communication and one concept in friendship communication. How do they explain the ways that family and friends communicate? And lastly, consider a theory of mediated communication that contributes to our understanding of how friends and family members communicate. I'm not going to be hard grading this, though if you would like to know what score feedback you should expect to receive, you're welcome to do so. But I do ask that you fully address and answer this question to the best of your ability for attendance for today. So I will give you 20 minutes to work on this question, and then we'll talk about this question together. So it's 10:04. We'll take until about 10:24, and I'll give you some warnings as we're getting close to the end of time. So your 20 minutes starts right now. We have 10 more minutes. Five more minutes. take about one more minute. Okay, go ahead and finish up your current sentence or thought. All right, so this was an example of the type of question you should expect to see on the final exam. Let's do another finger poll, one being very easy, 5 being very difficult, 3 being somewhere in between. How challenging did you find this question for? Okay. Some 2s, some 3s, kind of in the middle range. That's good to hear. Again, this is a question that's connected to the things we've been talking about this week with regard to friendship and family communication, right? So according to reading in class discussion, what ways are friendship and family communication similar and different? Well, both of them are involving self-disclosure. They're involving relationships that are meaningful to us, that happen over time. Both are related to the development of shared meaning and understanding between people. One thing that oftentimes characterizes friendships differently is that oftentimes they are detached and very voluntary. So sometimes they're not about sort of blood, adoption, or other types of familial relationships, but are instead based on context that you develop with other people. They also, one easy way of thinking about the difference is that friendship relationships have a starting point that doesn't really come from any sort of connection to the person, but it's cultivated over time. But we do see a lot of blurring between these. Again, a lot of people have developed a sense of chosen family, of very close friends they consider part of their family. So there's a lot of overlap here. One concept in family communication and one concept in friend communication. So there's a lot of different examples here that you can think about when you're exploring some of these ideas. For instance, one concept in family communication is the 2x2 quadrant of different styles that we talked about, for example, protective, consensual, laissez-faire, etc. You can use that model to explain some of the different ways that family members and friends or family members choose to communicate with each other. When it comes to friendship communication, you might integrate an example like the similarity thesis, that we gravitate toward friends or people that we have a lot in common with, or you could use that model of friendships that talks about how friendships develop over time and gradually become closer to one another as a similar approach. Theory of mediated communication. So we talked about a number of theories of mediated communication in the course, such as media richness theory, social presence theory, and so on. One example that you might give would be the idea of social presence theory or social information processing theory, and this idea of hyperpersonal communication. Mediated communication, according to this theory, can be even more intense and developed than face-to-face communication. And you could use this to argue that you're able to form really close friendships and family relationships with people with whom you communicate online. So those are some examples of ways that you could address that question, right? So again, a good example of what to expect. There are 2 more short essay examples, and you went through similar questions for the first exam, drawing from the second half of the class, but asking you to incorporate and synthesize some of these ideas. So before we get started on some of the new stuff for today, any questions, anything you'd like us to chat about further? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and touch base about this idea of family relationships in a bit more detail. one of the issues that we've explored has been one of the challenges of developing meaningful family relationships, knowing that there is a greater propensity for conflict, but that oftentimes in the family relationship, the presence of conflict is not a reason to terminate the relationship. You have somebody who you feel like is a bad friend, you might end the friendship, but while that's not possible for family, there are oftentimes a lot more constraints that make that a little bit more challenging. So there's a model that comes in from the book to describe the development of family relationships. And I think it's important to put this in context because as the book points out, and as scholars in communication have pretty actively identified, this is not a linear structure that every family follows. In fact, there's a lot of ways that we can think about family that go well outside of this model. For instance, individuals and a couple who choose not to have children and choose to kind of live their lives in that way. Individuals that might be part of a community or family group that goes outside of this linear structure. But I do think that in thinking about a lot of contexts where family communication is studied, this model is presented as a way of thinking about family relationships, right? That oftentimes family relationships develop through individuals who might start younger and single as developing relationships with other people. Young couples who do not have children, and at that stage, there's a focus on bonding, professional development, and so forth. In a full nest stage, there's a focus on how, with young children, a family is navigating unique challenges and roles that come with having children in their lives. Moving into school age and older children, there's a greater emphasis on moving back toward professional roles and autonomy. This is generally a time when oftentimes, and there are a lot of stereotypes, there's a midlife crisis that an individual has where they're returning to their routine, but the routine no longer feels satisfying and meaningful. And then later on in life, you might have adult children. You might move on to being what's called empty nester, who no longer has children in the home, experiences retirement, and in many cases, a sole survival in which there's a couple or household in which only one of the individuals is still alive. So this model, again, is very linear. I think is very essentializing and reductive of a lot of elements of family communication and relationships. One thing that this doesn't fully account for is divorce and the ways in which divorce can change family dynamics, having stepchildren, having people who are navigating that differently. I think another thing that is not really accounted for is this idea of leaving the nest, right? Like a bird leaving the nest to describe family relationships is something we don't see in the same way when a lot of people continue to live with family or move back in with family through college or professional work past that point. This is especially true in the context of COVID-19. But due to a lot of issues like financial barriers, it's something that we still see happen a whole lot, right? We have a lot more people who are commuters who might still live with family through college. So again, I think that there are a lot of ways that this model is complicated, but I do think that this model helps us to understand that at different stages of a family and how a family might develop or grow, different dynamics of individuals present in that family, we might negotiate a unique set of challenges and material experiences that shape how that family chooses to communicate. So how a family is modeled and understood is changing over time, right? Our conception of what makes a family and how we can continue to develop that definition is something we can continue to explore. Another really key idea here that I want to focus on is sibling relationships, right? So we mentioned that family relationships can be very powerful, but also very contentious. And one of the most unique types of relationships that's studied a lot in communication are the specifics of sibling relationships, right? So one way of modeling sibling relationships and understanding how siblings communicate differently is to think about this both in terms of defining the level of warmth and the level of hostility that siblings in relationships might choose to have with each other, right? So again, something can be intense and at times dramatic, but also positive in a sibling relationship. So if there is high hostility and low warmth, this is considered to be a hostile sibling relationship. you are arguing, you're fighting, you're disagreeing all the time, and you do not feel a sense of connection to your sibling, right? This happens a lot of times when negotiating issues of kind of step siblings or siblings who might grow up in different households or locations. They don't have the same requirement to be proximally involved with each other. They might feel some degree of frustration and anger toward one another, right? So this element is a big problem in effective family communication, right? Is a high degree of hostility for one another. So another model of thinking about this is what's known as affect intense. And the idea of this type of relationship is that there is a significant degree of feelings, both positive and negative. So in this type of relationship, people are angry, they're arguing a lot of the time, but they also might feel a great sense of closeness with one another, right? If you were in a household where you had siblings who were verbally arguing, disagreeing, fighting with each other all the time, but nevertheless really loved and cared about each other, that's the idea of an affect intense relationship, that there is very strong feelings on either side. An uninvolved one lacks both hostility and warmth. Again, an uninvolved sibling relationship might be related to having people in different households and locations, but there's not really a sense of frustration towards people in a sibling relationship. Then a lot of warmth, but a lack of hostility would be considered to be harmonious. A positive, meaningful relationship among siblings that is based primarily on developing a good relationship. And when we're thinking about these models, I think there are a few things that make a sibling relationship particularly unique. To a large extent, we consider siblings to be our peers. They might be older or younger than us, they might be our twin, but in any case, a sibling is somebody that we connect with in a similar age range compared to somebody like a parent or another family member, that we feel a sense of connection in stages of life, or we might closely model somebody's stages of life development. For example, we're seeing an older sibling starting to go to college, and maybe we're starting to model that and think about what we want to do, right? Or we have a younger sibling, and we might be put in a role of being a role model or example for that younger sibling, helping them out, teaching them how to drive, and so on. Another reason that sibling relationships are particularly unique is a sense of resources, right? So at times, siblings can feel a rivalry out of a sense of there being limited resources available. We can think about this in a very survival-oriented way, trying to get the love, the support, the food, right, and trying to compete over access to those basic things. But we also see this in terms of fulfilling other needs, right, belonging and social needs. At times, siblings might be at odds in terms of getting attention, maybe being seen as the favorite in a family or household, and so on. So there is a sense of navigating shared resources, and in a more harmonious relationship, that's viewed in a complementary way, right? One of my favorite examples here in describing how a harmonious sibling relationship might work is an example of two siblings who want a lemon, right? The brother says, hey, I want this lemon. Sister says, I want this too. But when the siblings sit down and talk to each other about why they want the lemon, they discover that one of them is interested in the lemon peel because they're going to be making like a candied lemon. The other person wants the kind of the juice inside because they're going to be making lemonade. And they understand that they're able to both use that lemon and through communication are able to resolve and bridge those differences and realize that it's not a scarce resource, rather one that they're able to collaborate on. So harmonious relationship is oftentimes characterized by these kind of complementary exchanges where people are able to figure out how to negotiate their needs and interests in a way that doesn't necessarily lead to the same degree of hostility or disagreement. Factors such as age, adoption status, household, and number of siblings oftentimes impact relationships too, right? So my partner and I are in drastically different sibling situations. My sister is older than me by 17 years to the day. She's also my half sister on my dad's side. My partner is the oldest of 6 siblings who are 2 years apart. And so we have very drastically different sibling experiences. Age, again, if there's greater distance for age, we might have greater geographic or other goals in communication with them, right? But at the same time, we might be more likely to lean on somebody as a role model or source of support. Adoption status, right? Sometimes in households, some siblings are adopted and some are not. That can impact the feelings of inclusion and belonging, particularly that adopted siblings might experience. A household, right? How big is that household? What number of people are in that household? Is there a split in siblings who might be present in one household but not the other? And so on. Again, a lot of the shows and examples we talked about last class can connect to that too. And then number of siblings. Generally speaking, a larger number of siblings means that there is a greater sense of competition or challenge with securing some of the things that siblings might be interested in or need for the sake of their relationships. In sibling relationships, we use a few different strategies to navigate and maintain positive relationships among people in the group. One of them is the idea of confirmation, right? Of reinforcing the relationship and ensuring somebody is important. Oftentimes, we might choose to speak with a sibling in a one-on-one way that we might not do with a family member. For instance, we might be more willing to confide a secret about our lives, like thinking about transferring to a different school. I haven't really told my mom and dad yet, but I want to let you know. So we might reinforce the relationship in that way. Sibling relationships are oftentimes characterized by humor. We oftentimes do silly things or we joke about memories that we have later. When I was a kid, we were out I think out doing some shopping and I didn't want to go home. And so I really liked trains. I liked Thomas the Tank Engine as a kid. And my sister told me that I was going to be taken somewhere with train tracks. And really, they were just trying to get me to leave and to go home. And I was like, oh, where are we going to go with train tracks? And they brought me home and I was really upset. But ever since, that's been a joke between my sister and I, where we kind of lean on that example of a prank being used as a source of our shared history. Social support and navigating social needs. So for instance, we might start to develop friend groups through our siblings. We find out that our siblings have a few friends, maybe we're interested in getting to know. We use Playdate groups from a young age, oftentimes to develop social support among siblings. Family visits in terms of frequency and regularity. Again, oftentimes we might choose to engage with a sibling in a specific way and through more time than we might with others. Escape, oftentimes we can use siblings as an opportunity to vent. Again, coming from a closer peer, a closer age to us, we feel a unique opportunity that they might share with us. And then verbal aggression, one of the challenges, again, in sibling relationships, the idea of perhaps arguing, disagreeing, and feelings of competition that can emerge. So we do a lot of different things depending on the nature of our sibling relationship to manage and try to maintain a positive relationship among siblings. The perception of scarcity and limited resources of siblings, again, is a big factor, right? If you think about animals in the wild, you think about like, a dog, and the dog is trying to get milk from an early age, and oftentimes dogs are like walking over each other, they're competing with each other, and so on, right? And sometimes there's a similar sense of scarcity and limited resources among siblings. The creation and establishment of identity. If we think back to Erik Erikson's developmental stages, right, one of the challenges that emerges here is the idea of how we develop identity through our relationships with other people. Sibling relationships provide us a way of cultivating identity, figuring out who we are based on who we're not, and what differences we have with siblings. For instance, at times, identical siblings can feel a bit of a challenge in establishing their own identity relative to who their sibling is. And perceived differences in life experiences. For instance, growing up in a very different environment or household can be a source of hostility or frustration or opportunity, right? Sometimes my partner jokes as the earliest sibling, she's felt like she's been the guinea pig or test subject, right? If you're an oldest sibling, sometimes you feel similarly, or sometimes you feel like over time, your family was not giving you the same degree of attention that they were to older siblings. So that can also be a source of frustration and challenge. And again, thinking about how siblings relate and communicate is in many ways a product of culture and cultural difference too. So one of the last things that I want to get at here is the role of marriage relationships. I think it's important to note that this also is present in a lot of what we might consider to be civil union type of relationships too. But in relationships among couples who have some type of contractual or other commitment toward one another, we see a few different perspectives that help us to understand how people communicate. And generally speaking, there are three different models that are proposed, right, of independence, separates, and a more conventional approach. Conventionality generally means that there's a high degree of interconnectedness, including economic interconnectedness, sharing a bank account. Also generally means that there is a high degree of disclosure and sharing of information. Whereas in a more non-conventional marriage or setup, there is perhaps less gender-dependent tasks and responsibilities that people in the group might have. People are doing different tasks or things that might fall outside of traditional gender stereotypes. There's also this idea of ideology, like the mental frameworks or approaches that people might have in a relationship. So depending on the marriage relationship, one example of ideological difference is viewing a marriage like this, right, where the two hands are just touching in this way, or like this, where the hands are together, overlapping, with how much closeness the individuals might have. Again, we might think about ideology in terms of culture. In a lot of cultures, there's an emphasis on arranged marriages and this union being more based on sort of the interests of the family or group rather than the individual. Interdependence versus autonomy, again, is an ongoing issue or discussion. How frequently do you message or communicate online with somebody? How frequently do you spend time with that person? How much space or independence do you have? We again are seeing a rise of greater distance in relationships too, especially if people are navigating different careers. And then conflict engagement versus avoidance. Are you in a marriage where you don't really talk about conflict, or you don't really argue with each other, or maybe you're arguing all the time, or somewhere in between, right? Again, studies suggest that a lack of conflict is not necessarily a sign of relationship health. In fact, oftentimes if there's a lack of conflict, it symbolizes that members of the marriage are not communicating with each other about the issues they have. So a degree of healthy conflict can actually be a beneficial thing for relationships. So as mentioned, we have traditionalists who generally follow much more defined, delineated family categories that might be based on things such as gender roles and stereotypes, but might also be based on delegation of labor. So deciding what responsibilities for things such as childcare and employment might look like. Independents are generally focused on autonomy, right? You can think about independence as a Venn diagram. They want closeness in a lot of contexts, but they also want the opportunity to do their own thing. And then separates generally lack much contact or intimacy in their relationship, do things like geographic separation and so on, right? We might see this in a lot of contexts in which there's not the same spark in a relationship that there was previously, or a relationship is less based on feelings of love or intimacy and more based on the material circumstances or convenience of some of those relationships. So this gets at some of the remaining things for this section, right? I wanted to have the chance for us to talk about sibling and marriage relationships in particular, because they represent some of the most challenging and I think interesting models of communication. There's a lot of research that's examining, for instance, sibling dyads. For example, a lot of work health communication that's looking at how siblings respond to something like a cancer diagnosis. And a lot of focus on marriage and family relationships, recognizing that that can be a source of significant disagreement and issues between people in a group. So I think this helps us to understand the unique tensions and issues that happen in these types of relationships. So next Monday, we'll be looking at interpersonal communication in the workplace, understanding the skills for good, effective professional workplace communication, and some of the challenges that come with engaging in that type of context. So get out a little early. Please email or pass forward your practice question for the day. Send me an email if you'd like feedback on that practice question. Have a great weekend. Remember, your Canvas prompt number 7 is due on Sunday, and I will see you again for our final week of the term.